Welcome into this week's edition of the High School OT Press Box. Evan Moesta here, going to be joined soon by High School OT's Joel Bryant and J. Mike Blake as it's about week one of football season. First Friday night is upcoming. We had a lot of jamborees over the last couple of weeks that kicked things off across the football landscape. Very exciting times. Volleyball also underway, boys soccer underway. We're going to dive across the state into all of those topics. Before we really dive deep into some of the football games to watch for this week and some of the big matchups and what makes Friday night so special around the state of North Carolina, I kind of want to just start on a little bit of a different topic and not as cheerful and exciting of a topic as I think we would all like, but I feel like it needs to be addressed. And I feel like it's something that if you have been a high school sports fan over the last half decade, you've in some way, shape, or form experienced this. And I just don't feel like we talk about this enough. And I'm going to start with Friday night. High School OT was fortunate enough to be a media partner with Southeast Raleigh Magnet High School as part of their Bulldog Bash. It was an awesome event, had some great teams at it. Unfortunately, the event ended a couple minutes early because out of caution for some of the fan behavior in the stands. And that is just becoming all too common in high school sports now, that people who are choosing to attend these events are distracting away from what makes the events special and what makes them important, and is why we are all so passionate and involved in high school sports. It's taking away from it. And obviously, there were reports that you may have seen of, after the fact, once the stadium was cleared out and people were heading out, that there were people with weapons in the parking lot, choosing, to act a certain way. And it's just, all of that is just so unnecessary. It's so ridiculous. I hate the fact that we as a society have now gotten to a point where this is affecting high school sports. I mean, this conversation, it's happened, it's been prevalent with amusement parks and movie theaters and shopping malls. And, they're having to put all of these different restrictions and barriers and limitations on youth and crowds that attend because for whatever reason, that is a platform for people to act violent and act out of turn. And it's a real shame, honestly. I hate that we're going to even having to take time out of this episode, but I just want to address it right away. I mean, it's a little ridiculous that this is where we're at now. Is this where we are? Are we going to have to be like, there's other areas of this country that have to play high school sporting events on Saturday afternoons, and they have to play them during the daytime, during school hours, and they're having to have all of these limitations and restrictions just so they can play high school sports. And what is so magical in each community is high school athletics, is the ability to bring a community together. And some people are so selfish in their actions at these games. They attend these games not even to watch what's happening on the field. These people never take a look at the field, and they stay up in a concourse, or it's happening too much. It's happening at too many of these jamboree type events. It happened last year at the High School OT Jamboree at Wake Forest. And, as I bring in Joel Bryant and I bring in J. Mike Blake, yeah, it's all too prevalent. I'm going to use Joel as an example here. I mean, Joel, in the last couple of years, you in particular at high school football games have experienced so much. I know you were at a Forest Hills Monroe game a few years ago where the threat of a weapon or a weapon on the premises had to end the game prematurely. I mean, I know a year ago, Mallard Creek and West Charlotte, two programs who have a boatload of state championships over the last decade, get together for a big time matchup. And even in a district that is as well secured as Charlotte Mecklenburg schools, the amount of metal detectors and security you have to go through to even get onto the premises, that game had to be suspended and evacuated because of the threat of violence and a weapon. I mean, it's becoming all too prevalent. I can say I was at a basketball playoff game this year where a fight broke out in the stands and spilled onto the court over at Reedsville, and police had to come onto the court and evacuate everybody out of that. I mean, we're not too far removed. I was at a playoff basketball game 2-3 years ago where there was suspicion that a kid had an AR-15 on the premises. Like, why are we at this point? And it's sad. It really is sad because the measures that have to be taken now to stop this are measures that, you know, we as people who are so passionate about high school sports, we don't, it's not that we don't take them into account. It's just, we don't think that we have to go to those levels because we think high school sports are such a great place for community and for togetherness and memory making for these kids. You get one chance to play high school sports, and you know, you think about seniors and you know, for some of those seniors at Jordan or at Southeast Raleigh, they were denied 30 extra minutes of their high school football careers because somebody decided to act some type of way in the crowd. It's honestly, it's a little ridiculous, and I know we don't stand for that type of stuff. We don't stand for that type of behavior, and I think everybody now, when you look at the landscape of high school sports and what the environment is when you attend a game in certain parts of the state, that this is a very true reality that can happen, and it needs to continue to be cracked down on, but there's so many layers to it. I don't know how exactly you do that.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. All you have to do is look at Jordan and Southeast Raleigh, how their players and coaches reacted when they were told that they could no longer play because of something that was happening that they were not in control of. Frankly, I mean, we know who's doing it. It's a bunch of teenagers who show up at these events who aren't even watching the game. They're there to socialize. They pay $10 to do what they can do outside of a stadium. For whatever reason, they're particularly easily agitated and they get into fights and whatnot. I'm not going to comment on whether there was a weapon at the Forest Hills Monroe game a couple of years ago or the West Charlotte Mallard Creek game. I didn't see it personally. Not going to comment on it. But I do think in a lot of cases it's just plain fighting that starts this stuff. I know on Friday night, I believe it was a couple of kids that potentially got into a fight and there was some running after, and then that kind of created like a cascade effect at Southeast in that crowd where everyone saw the running and decided they're going to run too. I think this is it's a larger societal question. Some of the conversations I've had with the coaches after Friday night, they told me like, Joel, this is what we deal with every day during the school day. And the kids are just acting the same way at night. They're not really getting consequences for acting that way. And it's just kind of this is what we've been dealing with since COVID, basically. They think that COVID kind of changed the kids. The kids are kind of a little bit more aggressive, a little bit even more just non-conforming to order and just authority as well. I ultimately think it's probably a parenting issue. Parents think they can, drop their kids off at one of these games for $10 and not to like deal with parenting for a night, I guess. So I think a lot of it goes back to the parenting. It's just unfortunate. It's unfortunate we have to deal with it. Like you mentioned, Evan, this is something that's been happening in a lot of industries, amusement parks, theme parks, movie theaters, malls. You've seen a lot of these places install a chaperone policy or a curfew for these young kids. I think they've worked. It'd be unfortunate if that has to happen in high school because there are a lot of kids that show up to these who want to support their school and support their friends. So I hope that those kids wouldn't be, stopped from seeing, that their classmates and whatnot. But something's gonna have to be done. I hope we don't have to go to Saturday games. You reminded me the other day, actually, I had to go to a Saturday afternoon game between Northeast Guilford and Dudley a couple of years ago as well because of something that happened the night before or something. So I was there in the blazing afternoon sun of Saturday watching high school football when it should be played on a Friday night under the lights. It's just unfortunate. A lot of the adults are confused. The adults don't know what to do. This has been happening, like they said, for a while now, and it's kind of it's an upsetting situation because it's affecting people that are doing the right thing and going about things the right way, and I just hate to see that.
Yeah, J Mike, is there really like a solution to this that, obviously, as Joel said, it's much larger ranging than just high school sports. But if we were to put a microscope on just the high school sports experience on a Friday night and what makes it so special, like, are there things that can be done that come to your mind? Because obviously, on some of these topics, like, I feel like you've had a pretty broad perspective on what's happened in different areas.
Yeah, I'm coming up short on a notable idea. I think the chaperone policy has been used in other places, and that could possibly be a reason. But I think at first you just have to kind of deal with the landscape as it is, which is way more of this is happening post COVID than before. I am the last person to blame everything on COVID. Right? I've been a teacher since before COVID happened. I never try to let that be a crutch for a student about why they weren't doing something, try to get them up to speed. But in this case, I do think you step back and look at society and say, when kids come together and some people see an event and their first thing is like, the adults are messing it up for the kids. No, other kids are messing it up for kids. It is almost never an adult. It is in some cases where, a mom and dad are barking at somebody and it gets physical. But let's not also act like it's just a high school thing, because I can go open my phone right now and find a whole bunch of fights from preseason NFL games from fans in the stands. So there is something in society that's just allowed people that don't know how to interact in person, and things get they start saying things to people they don't know, and then push buttons that they probably shouldn't push, and all of a sudden everybody else is running because they don't know what's happening, and people just don't feel safe like they used to. Um, I would, because how some of these games that have been, there's another one out there, I think it was Glenn versus Chambers, that it wasn't anything in the stadium. It was out in the parking lot. And I've been at a game, it was 71st at Pine Forest, where something had happened in the parking lot right after the game. And I couldn't even do a post game interview. They said, we got to get this team on this bus and get them chaperoned out of here. And Fayetteville to me is, really one of the places I feel the most safe at in going to a high school game, because they take everything. So they take the parking lot seriously and the entrance and all of that. Like Fayetteville, for whatever bad rap it gets from outsiders, like they know how to make measures in play, put measures in place to make sure the high school events are done right and everyone's in a good environment. I'm going to bring in a random thing that I think connects to all of this. How it may seem random at first, but when I was in high school at Western Harnett, we did not have. It was a big school, almost 2,000 students. Back when it was 4A, we never really had a student section for football games. We did for basketball, but students would buy the tickets, and then the setup at Western Harnett almost allows for this, where there's a big area by the fence. When you first walk in, you actually have to kind of make an effort to get into the stands. And so some people just hang out there and never go to the stands all night. That was always when I got to Wake County, or we were playing teams in Wake County that year, or if, when I first started working, I was amazed at the student sections that I would see for football games as something I would see in college. Well, the reason Western Harnett, in my opinion, didn't have a strong student supporting students in football is we didn't feel like a community. There is no town on the western side of Harnett County. I know the post office is Lillington, but no one from Lillington actually goes to Western Harnett. It's so far away. So you lack community. It was hard to get school pride. The most people talked about our football team in my 4 years was the year they went 2-9, not the year they went 9-2. Okay, because when it was 2-9, then people had something to talk about. They didn't want to get their hopes up. They were jaded. They didn't want to hope that the team could win a conference championship or state championship. It was easier just say like, oh, they lost again, they suck again. So all that, like, very jaded things that came at that time from that community or lack of community, I think since COVID has spread to other places. We're not used to seeing it. I think there's a lack of school pride. I think people are like, why am I even here? I don't really care to see this team play. I don't care. I don't have a single friend on the team. A lot of that is spreading. We cannot just go into it with a mindset that a lot of people are here to see this game. it does happen. Obviously, we don't have these events when it gets playoff time because all of a sudden people are a little bit more invested. But early season in particular, it's the social event, and there's a lack of, why should I take care of my neighbor? Why should I take care of this facility? Why should I look out for what's happening on the field? And if something over here disrupts them, why should I care? It reminds me of those days in my own high school that we felt a little disconnected and there was a lack of school pride. And I think that is in so many places now that, it's sad. It's a little, nihilistic. Like nothing really matters. I'm just going to go and if I get into a fight tonight, I get into a fight tonight at the game. It doesn't really matter that, Joel's like, you could do all this stuff somewhere else. Well, that would imply that they cared where it happens. So I think ultimately that is, you're dealing with some jaded folks. I don't think it's because of COVID. I just think since COVID, that's where people are. And unfortunately, a lot of schools are going to have to look at things that may disrupt their biggest events, which are football, basketball, these places that drive the revenue for the entire school. Now, all of a sudden, we're going to, I don't know what it can be other than the chaperone rule, but I'm sure somebody out there smarter than me can figure it out and try to tackle this thing where it is, because we shouldn't mess up the great thing that we've got. And there are attacks on high school sports every day. There's a non-scholastic academy every day opening up, trying to get people to just play sports to play sports. There's somebody scamming kids out of money for scholarship opportunities that kid was going to get anyway. There are kids scamming. There are people scamming kids out of money for exposure when it's an Instagram post that a bunch of his friends are going to like. There are attacks on high school sports every day, and this is yet another one. And it needs to be dealt with seriously.
I couldn't be said better. Yeah, I mean, and it's sad because there's all these public service announcements that are now having to go out around the high school athletics landscape, and whether it be we need more officials, or there needs to be better sportsmanship between athletes and and coaches. There needs to be better parent behavior, because, as you said, Jay Mike, this is not a topic that's just limited to teenagers and young adults. You can go sit at any high school sporting event across the state right now, and if you sit within a certain radius of any amount of parents, you're going to hear things that don't need to be said at high school sporting events. And this is another one. And it's like, it's not entirely on all the governing bodies of high school athletics in the state of North Carolina, but it's another thing that needs to be thrown onto their plate unnecessarily, that needs to be addressed. There needs to be a public service announcement about behavior at a game. And it's wild that we even need to say that, but it's another one of those things where, I think as this continues, people are going to have to call upon, larger governing bodies outside of just their athletic department or just the school district. And change needs to be made. I know it's a very interesting subject that has a lot of layers to it, but I think Friday night was not fun to deal with and see how that all went. So it's something that we want to definitely have our part in whatever way we can slow it down and stop it. Let's keep talking about football, though. Let's get on a much brighter note than all of this. Joel, obviously, week 1 coming up here in just a couple of days. Across the state, there's some really, really good week 1 matchups. I think everybody's eyes immediately go over to the Keep Pounding Classic in Charlotte. It's the 3rd annual one, hosted by the Carolina Panthers over at Bank of America Stadium. Huff and South Point from South Carolina are opening it up, and then there's the marquee matchup with number 1 West Charlotte facing number 2 Grimsley in the nightcap at 8 o'clock. All 3 of the top 3 teams in High School OT's preseason rankings are involved in that event. Joel, it feels like that's the headliner to this, but there are a ton of really good games. I guess just to start, though, you got to go 1, 2, 3. Like, what do you expect out of this Keep Pounding Classic?
Well, for the Huff South Point game, I don't know anything about South Carolina. I don't know anything about South Point. I just know that they have an E at the end of their South Point versus ours doesn't have an E. But Huff, obviously without knowing anything about South Point, the thing you can still learn is about Ethan Royal, the new quarterback at Huff. We've known about Ethan Royal for a while. This is his first year with the opportunity to start. And he's going to need to be really good if Huff is going to beat West Charlotte and contend for an AA championship. This Huff team has never quite broken through. They've been very talented many years and still been really broken through to a state championship. So if Ethan Royal can kind of deliver on the promise that he has, I think Huff will justify that top 3 ranking in the statewide poll. And I think, Friday night's going to be a pretty good indication of what he can do. Then, of course, the Grimsley West Charlotte game, I mean, it doesn't get any better than this, 1 versus number 2 in the state. This one's going to come down to the trenches. And I think it's also going to come down to the Grimsley receiving core, which is very good, against West Charlotte's defensive backfield, which is very good. If Faison Brandon gets even a little bit of separation from his receivers, we can be confident he's going to find them and he's going to hit them accurately. His arm talent obviously is insane. Throws he can make all over the field, they're just crazy. So the Grimsley receivers beat the West Charlotte defensive backs in their one-on-one battles when they get the chance. That'll be interesting to see how far Grimsley can go up the field. But West Charlotte may not even risk it with man coverage too much. So we'll just see how West Charlotte approaches it. But ultimately, the Grimsley offensive line, they're going to need to fend off that defensive line for West Charlotte. The problem with the West Charlotte defense is there's no weakness to it. At all 3 levels, the defensive line, linebacker core, defensive backfield, I mean, there's not a single weakness on the defense. And that's ultimately why they're number 1 ranked team in the state right now. But if there's any player that can overcome it, it's the number 1 overall player in the country in this class, Faison Brandon. So, yeah, just can't wait for this one. I'm pretty confident in West Charlotte's offense as well. Pretty much the entire offense is back from last year, including their excellent quarterback, Jamori Nichols. Super excited for this one. We're going to have Jonas Pope down there for the first time. He's going to cover. He's going to do a good job writing the stories. We're going to hear from him on the HighSchoolOT postgame show. So, yeah, just can't wait to see how these 2 end.
You mentioned Jonas joining us on the HighSchoolOT postgame show this Friday. The HighSchoolOT game of the week, which is going to be sponsored by Alpaca Chicken, is heading down to the Sandhills for week 1. It's going to be Terry Sanford against defending 3A state runner-up 71st. Joel, that's the first of a couple really big games that are happening down in the 910 area code.
Yeah, obviously, we love the 71st Terry Sanford game. We picked it for game of the week. Fascinating to see what both teams look like, in real football. We saw Terry Sanford at our HighSchoolOT Jamboree, but I don't think that the Jamboree rules were quite conducive to what Terry Sanford wants to do offensively. Their quarterback, Jacob Moore, is a really good dual threat. And obviously in a Jamboree setting, they're just going to tag him and he's going to be down. I think there's a lot of cases in that Jamboree where he probably would have escaped in the real game. But against the 71st defense where they have John Archer on the defensive line, and they have a new player from Westover who came over on the defensive line as well, who also has a Georgia offer like Archer does. Those guys are going to have to get their hands on him. And if they can bring him down, then the 71st is going to have a good night. But if he slips away a lot and he makes things happen, if he's creative, Terry Sanford's going to have a fighting chance. The Terry Sanford offensive line is going to be a lot smaller than the 71st defensive line. So they're going to have to get the ball out fast when they can and lean on the running backs as well.
Yeah, and I feel like that quarterback battle that's been going on at 71st is going to be intriguing to see as well on the offensive side. Obviously, no more DeAndre Nance over for the Falcons. Joel, another game as I look at the schedule of what's happening down in the 910. Down at the beach, it's going to be Richmond. The Raiders are heading over to play Hoggard. These are 2 teams that have been really successful over the past decade or so. What do you expect out of that matchup?
I believe this is our 1 versus 2 in the 910, if I remember correctly. Richmond obviously, kind of came on really strong last year under Brad Denson, his first year as the head coach there. He's been there many years as an assistant. Richmond was very young last year. There were a lot of juniors on that team. Both of their quarterbacks they used last year are back. Their outstanding linebacker, Teran Spencer, for my money, he's the best linebacker in the state right now. He's back, and I can't wait to see what he does this season before he gets to ECU. And Hoggard, last year, they had a sophomore starting quarterback, Matthew Boring, and he looked really good. He's an accurate passer. He's a big body, good arm. So Matthew Boring in his junior season, looking forward to see what he can do. And that's a top 25 matchup in the state, top 2 matchup in the 910. And I'm not quite sure who's going to win it, but the good news is we're going to find out pretty fast.
Stay in the eastern part of the state, the 919 area code. The WRL Football Friday game of the week presented by Bojangles is going to be Millbrook and Garner. There's some other good matchups in the 919 as well, Joel.
Yeah, I'm looking at the Leesville Road Jordan game. Jordan looked really good on Friday night. They were going back and forth with Southeast Raleigh. Gosh, that was going to be such a good jamboree game if we saw the whole thing. Both those teams were moving the ball kind of at will against defenses that are pretty good. So both those offenses were very talented. And Jordan, the thing about them is Amarion Blue is not there from last year. They're a consistent 2,000-yard running back, but pretty much the rest of the team's back. And that's about 18 starters back from last year. They have a 4-star on the defensive line, Noah Clark, who was dominant. He was probably the best thing Jordan had going defensively in that scrimmage on Friday night. Noah Clark can be a problem, but Leesville Road, they have an ACC wide receiver, Devin Goldston. He's a 6'3" weapon. His brother, DeAndre Goldston, was the quarterback. He's graduated now, so the Leesville Road quarterback situation is very fascinating to me. If they get good play out of the quarterback, Leesville is going to be a factor in the 8A East. So we're going to get a good answer to that pretty early here on Friday.
And then that Millbrook-Garner game, we saw both of those teams. We saw the Trojans play really well against Wake Forest in the Bulldog Bash, and then we saw Millbrook escape Southeast Raleigh down the stretch at the High School OT Jamboree. What do you expect out of that game?
Yeah, so the Garner defensive backfield totally shut down the Wake Forest passing attack. And I know Wake Forest had some success through the air against Middle Creek at the High School OT Jamboree, but the Garner defensive backs, Tatum McFadder, who was also a running back, had that pick 6 in that Bulldog Bash, but also Max McDowell, he's committed to Gardner Webb, and AJ Randall, he has 10 offers. That is as good of a defensive backfield as you'll find in the 919. And that's the thing for Millbrook this year is they want to get better in the passing game. New quarterback Bryson Gray is a full-time starter for the first time this year. They have new weapons in the wide receiver room. We think they'll be able to run the ball, but this will be a very good test for that passing game in Millbrook to see how much of a step they've taken this year.
Let's head over to the western part of the state, the 336 in the Triad area. Logan Carter, one of High School OT's newest contributors, is going to be out at Mount Tabor and Reagan. You have Mount Airy Starmount out in that area as well. There's a handful of games there that involve some of the top teams in the Triad and some of those extended areas of the Piedmont.
Yeah, my mind first went to the Starmount Mount Airy game. Mount Airy, I think a lot of people might be kind of not counting them out, but maybe overlooking them a little bit this year because they lost to Corvian last year, and they had their big winning streak ended by the Corvian Cardinals. Mount Airy, this 2026 class is quite good. It's not maybe as good as the 2024 class that had Derek Dandy and Tyler Mason in them, but it's a very, very good class. We have a star running back in Tayshawn Martin, really good defensive end, DJ Joyce, big nose guard, Third Floyd, who I love. This Mount Airy team, obviously they don't have a good taste left in their mouth from last year, but this year they have a chance to go for another state championship in the 3A classification. And Starmount, under Josh Pardue last year, Starmount was really good. They do have some key graduates though, but the JV team has so many promising players on it that this game is going to be another tight contest between Starmount and Mount Airy.
And then staying in the West, they're out to the mountains of the 828. Are there any games as you go through those schedules that really stand out during week 1?
Yeah, so AC Reynolds at Brevard. There's a 2 classification difference in this one. We're going to get used to saying stuff like that because we have so many classifications now. But AC Reynolds in 6A, they picked up a couple of key transfers this offseason. They had a really efficient quarterback from Asheville Christian Academy come in named Avery Hollifield. So fascinating to see what this guy looks like in 6A football. This year for AC Reynolds. I know that their offense was kind of maybe a little gimmicky at Asheville Christian. There's a lot of quick passes, lots of screens and stuff like that. So seeing him operate Shane Laws' offense at AC Reynolds is going to be fascinating. In Brevard, they have so much talent back from last year's team. They were really good in 2A. Now they're a 4A school. The difference for Brevard this year, they don't have their key guys on the defensive line who graduated. So that's going to be the key. Can they get pressure on the new AC Reynolds quarterback?
Yeah, Brevard making an appearance last year in the 2A West regional final where they fell to eventual state champion Monroe. Let's head from the far western part of the state to the far east. Joel, wrapping it up with a couple of big games that stand out to you in the 252 in Eastern North Carolina.
Yeah, so speaking of last year's playoffs, last year J.H. Rose was the 30th seed in the 3A East. And one of the teams that they upset to get to the 4th round was Northern Nash. And Northern Nash, they're not too happy about that upset because, they had some running backs down in that game. They're probably the better team overall, and Rose just kind of caught them on the right night for Rose. Obviously, Northern Nash wants to get some payback, so they're going to host J.H. Rose week 1. so fascinating to see this one. Rose, obviously, they're going to prove that it wasn't a fluke last year as well. And Northern Nash, there were some key players in that team back. They have a huge wide receiver, really good running back. Can't wait for this one.
That is Joel Bryant breaking down all of the top games that are happening in each region of the state during week 1 of the football season. Again, that is this Friday night. You can watch the high school OT game of the week presented by Alpaca Chicken live from Terry Sanford High School. J. Mike Blake will have the call of that one as the Bulldogs host 71st High School. And again, at 11:15, you can watch highlights on WRL TV's Football Friday as they go around the eastern part of the state and look at some of the top games and some of the top players. As always, from 10:15 to 11:15, you can tune into the High School OT post-game show where we will be speaking to people from some of these top games, both media members, coaches, and players. Let's keep things moving now. Another big news topic that came up over the last 2 weeks was the fact that a emergency board meeting was called by the NCHSAA, and Commissioner Q. Tucker asked for essentially permission to be able to modify the initial schedule for the 2025-2026 athletic year. And in doing that, she wanted to allow more flexibility for the NCHSAA to change around their schedule and adjust some of the times and some of the dates for state championship events. Typically, state championships have been hosted on Fridays and Saturdays. So not too far after that board meeting and not too far after that was all approved by the board, which gave the association the autonomy to do whatever to, put together these championship schedules. We got what they're going to look like. In some sports, it's moving up a day. In other sports, it's adding 2 or 3 days. What we are going to see, though, are state championships happening on weekdays. But I think one of the main things that the NCHSAA wanted to prevent was the ability to, or was having state championships that are played during the school day. They want to get as many of these happening in the evening as possible. There's no really right way that you can cut this up now that you have 8 classifications and 8 state championships to fulfill. So do we feel like the NCHSAA, and I'm going to ask you, J. Mike, do we feel like what they put together was the best model that you can, or is this just let's get through the first year, see what it looks like? As you looked and combed through that schedule, what stood out to you the most?
Going to, who knows if we have, some days that were added to the schedule that are not needed later on. I have 2 major takeaways before I can kind of go sport by sport, but just in general, anytime you see a Thursday championship that's been added to a sport that was typically Friday and Saturday or just Saturday, I'm thinking if you are 8A or 7A, that might be your new championship slot, is that Thursday night. Because I guarantee if there's Thursday there, then they're not going to start midday Friday. They're going to start in the middle of the day, but not noon, right? And then Saturday will stay about the same as it always has. But I think if you're 7A or 8A, the biggest schools, you have fan bases that are naturally just closer to an interstate. So you can get to that. You can bring a crowd with you. Even though it's, not an easy trip necessarily, depending on where you're coming from, but you can get to that soccer championship in Matthews or that basketball championship in Winston-Salem if it goes back there, the wrestling championship in Greensboro, or the volleyball championship in Raleigh. You can get to those places. 8A, the farthest west team in 8A might be Chambers, and in far east, you've only got, outside of Wake County, there's just Corinth Holders, which is right across the line. And then you have Hoggard and Laney. Actually, the 2 8A schools that might not have an interstate right next to them are Hope County and Pinecrest. And they're pretty much equally distant from all those places I just named. Again, in the past, who got the Friday night billing? Typically, that was, the 2 schools that are the closest to an interstate, so that it wasn't as bad to make it to that Friday night game. And then on Saturday, again, they took travel into consideration, because of some of these classifications that are not 8A and 7A, you have schools that are in the mountains. Murphy, we forget, is further west than the city of Detroit. And then you have like First Flight and Manio and Cape Hatteras and Ocracoke and all these schools out in the Outer Banks. So again, I think that was my major takeaway is buckle up 8A, 7A, Friday in the middle, Friday, the first game on Friday or Thursday night, that could be your slot. The second thing is, man, this is not good for basketball playoffs because in the first week, they're going back to a system that I did not like years ago and wrote about it, where you play 3 playoff games that first week, Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. The thing with basketball playoffs is the very next week, there's a 4th round game on Monday. So if your team wins on Saturday, you do not practice on Sunday because that's illegal. And then you play again on Monday with no practice, no opportunity to get with your team, scout, anything. And then the reason it has to be that way, playoffs are supposed to be on this 3-week schedule, and they need more days to do regionals, where in the past it was a Final Four format. Final Four format got blown up when we doubled the classification size. It was wonderful. I mean, it was a hit. I think we can all say that. A few teams complained because they didn't want to have to travel. Welcome to the state championship. You're gonna have to. You may have to hit it, especially if you're down by the coast or in the mountains. You're going to have to travel. That basketball the basketball schedule to me, if I'm basketball coaches, I'm thinking of ways that I can end my season not on a Friday, but on a Wednesday now, so that we can space out these rounds a little bit, which is unconventional, I know, to end on a Wednesday, but some tournaments did that last year just because we had snow in the forecast. You end your last conference tournament championships are on Wednesday. The brackets come out Thursday. You prep on Friday, first round Saturday. And then the next week, if you have 3 rounds, at least you have a little bit of time off before you go into regional play. But I think basketball is the one that's looking at this going, oh man, this doesn't, where our calendar got changed for the worst. And then also the Thursday games, who that affects, it will affect the folks in the big cities.
Yeah, Jay Mike. And, I think one of the other things we look at, and I think if you just read the headline or you just read the external stuff of just, wow, there's going to be a state championship on a Tuesday, which is going to be the case with indoor track in the winter, that logistically may not be the worst scenario. And another thing to keep in mind as you're reading these and looking at these, the NCHSAA has not finalized any of these venues yet. The reason they had to go and construct this is so they can now pursue venues to host these state championships. And again, as we've kind of dove into throughout this entire realignment, one of the last things we want are for state championships to go to high schools. Nothing against high schools, but I mean, it's just not an ideal state championship venue, state championship host site. So now that we look at this, we can say with confidence, the fast track over at JDL is going to be doing indoor track because that's the only one in the state. But you've covered this event, and yeah, it stands out there. There's going to be a state championship on a Tuesday, but again, logistically, from your experience, that's pretty realistic.
Yeah, if you have not been to the JDL Fast Track in Winston-Salem, it's kind of an industrial area. The building itself, I think it used to be like a Kodak or something. So it's completely remodeled to be an indoor track facility that was never designed in the first place to be an indoor track facility, but it's actually a really good one. I mean, I think the ACC has their championships there. A few other colleges have their indoor championships here. Used to be, I think when my wife was in high school, she was in track. UNC had one. That's kind of like part of the indoor train. I believe it's now part of their indoor practice facility for football, and they don't really have an indoor track anymore. So this is the only one in the state, but because it's back in a kind of an industrial area and there's a brewery right next to it and everything else, you can't just have an event in the middle of the day because no one's going to have anywhere to park. I mean, when I went on a Friday night, and I've been on Friday night and Saturday, and I am parking where someone probably moved their car right at 5:01 getting out of work for the day. I'm parking in that business's parking lot, and I see the security camera kind of flashing as it's trying to make sure no one messes with anything. But again, those people work. That's their 9 to 5, and you can't go disturb it. So even in my head, I was like, well, maybe they'll do 2 per day. Quickly, I reminded myself, wait, you can't, because you can't just, there's no place for parents to go. It's not like it's the biggest spectator event. You don't have casual fans showing up to track. You have parents and family members and friends and other members of the team. But even still, it's not a lot of parking room to, especially once you figure out where you're going to put the buses. I will say this, like, also, Evan, you mentioned, hey, hopefully don't go back to high schools. If the association can avoid going back to high schools this year, it's a huge win for them, because I didn't think it would be possible. The added days does add the possibility to going to one venue for all of those days. That works for staffing, but it also is more lucrative to an area or to a venue if they can get 8 championships at their place, rather than the other thing we thought could be a possibility, which I guess is still on the table, where you do 2 concurrent championships at 2 different sites. Yeah, selfishly, I'm like, oh no, I want to see as many as I can. Even though I know I'm going to miss some more championships this year with the middle of the day Friday and things like that. However, if it's more lucrative for those championship sites to have, all of the events, if you're the Greater Raleigh Sports Authority, or commission, you want people to come to your city over and over. That's kind of one of the reasons the old regional format fell apart, is cities like Fayetteville, Greenville, Hickory, Winston-Salem, they once it became a one-day event, they were like, well, this isn't really worth pursuing years in advance. But if you're bringing people to their city multiple days in a row, all of a sudden it's a nice little thing to happen. Think about any youth sports event that comes to any area. It is a multi-day event. People get hotels, all this other stuff. People are, having nice dinners at sit-down restaurants and not just grabbing fast food on their way out. So it's probably
it's part of the reason the Final Four format was so successful in Winston-Salem.
Yes, absolutely. So yeah. I think this, and you're still going to have championships for basketball over a few days, right? 4 days. I'm interested in how they do like baseball, softball, those things. But again, like, it's not the worst thing that it's being done this way, because I think it actually helps you lock down good venues.
We can only hope that that is the case there. Speaking of top events and top venues, the High School OT Volleyball Showcase is heading to Garner High School once again this Saturday. An all-day event, 5 matches starting at 11 a.m. at Garner High School. It features 8 top 25 ranked teams in High School OT's rankings, including a number 1 matchup at 3 o'clock between Cardinal Gibbons and D.H. Conley. The defending champion Crusaders are going up against the Vikings in a rematch of last year's what was then 4A Eastern Regional Final. The event starts again at 11 a.m. Cleveland and Seaforth. And then Garner hosts Person at 1. Again, that Cardinal Gibbons Conley game is at 3 o'clock. Chapel Hill and J.H. Rose Tangle at 5, and then the nightcap is Green Level and Orange. Lots of exciting volleyball there. High School OT will also have coverage of Friday night football and volleyball and soccer throughout the week. For Evan Moesta, J. Mike, Blake, and Joel Bryant, you've tuned in to this week's edition of the High School OT Press Box.